class or any other class. I've been in that situation as a student where you have a person being like, oh, so you only got a 90 on the test, huh? All right, well, I got a 95. Then they're like, you're a loser. You suck. And then I'll be like, well, yeah, but your class average was 98. So your 95 sucks. My class average was a 70, and I got a 90, so I'm like a rock star, and you're the loser. So, how do you get that? You get that from Z-scores. Right? So Michael and Jane are in different math classes. Michael scored 75 on his math test. Jane scored 73 on her math test. The mean score in Michael's class is 73, standard deviation 7.2. Jane's class, the mean was 71, standard deviation 6.3, which is the two students scored better relative to their classes. Highlight that, emphasize it on your handout in any way you like. But if these words aren't there, it's a completely different question. Because if the question said, which of these two students scored better, you know the answer. Michael scored better, you got a 75, she got a 73. Relative to their classes. All right, that's the key ingredient. So z-score is x minus x bar over s. So basically what we're looking for is the deviation, how far you are away from the mean, in units of standard deviations. All right, so we're not working with units of points anymore. So if I say, just looking at the top, the class average was 73 and I got a 75. My deviation is 2. I'm 2 points above average. Right? By dividing it by the standard deviation, I'm changing the units to standard deviations. So it's kind of along the lines of going from inches to centimeters. You're doing a unit conversion. It's just, instead of counting in terms of inches, some arbitrary length that we call an inch, we're creating an arbitrary length that we call a standard deviation. Right? Somebody invented the length of a foot and said, this distance, we're going to call that a foot. So 2 of these equals 2 feet. Well, 2 of these now equals 2 standard deviations, with the length of the standard deviation being either determined by calculation or given. All right. So z, I'm going to sub it with an m, a little subscript of m, just to indicate that we're talking about Michael, versus z sub j. This is his x value. X value always represents an individual score. I don't know why I wrote an x there. I want to actually write the 75. There's my x bar. The standard deviation was a 7.2. So we can crank those numbers out. It's 2 over 7.2, which approximates out to be about 0.278. Hey, listen, passing is passing, 75, C+, right? But in terms of like bragging rights, if your sole purpose is to compare your score to the class average, I mean, I don't think he should be dancing a jig down the hall. Like, I mean, it's only a smidge above the class average, so I don't even know why they're having an argument. Right? So let's see where she's at. 73 was her individual score. 71 was the class average, and 6.3. So 2, wrong thing. 2 divided by 6.3. Looking at about 0.317. All right. Context is important. You got to be thinking about whether or not a higher z-score is a better number. So let me just do a quick normal curve. I'll put a 0 here. If you have a standardized mean, it goes to 0. All right. So the center of your normal curve goes to 0. We'll talk about what a standard normal curve is down the line. But basically, it's just saying that if I were to take a score and subtract from it the mean, and that score itself is the mean, you're going to get 0. Right? The mean itself has no deviation from the mean. 0.278 is a smidge to the right of 0. So I'll put a 1 here just to get a little sense of it. We'd have 0.278 and then 0.317. So this one here is z sub m, and then I'll make this a different color, z sub j. So we can conclude that Jane performed better relative to her class. All right. And that's only because larger numbers are better in this context. Let's go back to golf scores, infant mortality. I hate going back to that, but that one really drives the point home. Like, you don't want a high number for infant mortality rate. That means lots of babies are dying. Right? So you want it the other way. All right. So think about the situation before you write down your answer, because when this question is on the test, I forget, it might be question number 7 on the test. Before we go to take a test, I'll give you the breakdown of what the questions will be in what order. But there'll be a question just like this, and the people who get it wrong, they get it wrong because they do all of this work correctly, and then say Michael at the end. And it's just because they're not thinking about it. All right, so just be very careful about that, and you won't have a problem.